The smell of my mother's vanilla candles couldn't mask the tension in our family living room. I sat on the uncomfortable wooden chair they'd deliberately chosen for me, facing a semicircle of disappointed relatives like I was on trial. At 29, I was apparently old enough to be lectured, but not old enough to be respected. My father, Robert Anderson, stood at the center of the room in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, looking every inch the successful insurance executive he'd been for 30 years. To his right sat my mother, Patricia, her perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap, wearing that expression of concerned disappointment she'd perfected since my teenage years. My brother Marcus occupied the leather recliner, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light as he scrolled through his phone with practiced indifference. At 32, he was the golden child, married to his college sweetheart, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, and a middle management position at Dad's firm. Everything our parents had ever wanted. My sister Claire perched on the edge of the sofa, her designer purse clutched like a shield. At 26, she just landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm. Though I suspected our father's connections had more to do with it than her resume. She kept glancing between me and her phone, probably texting her boyfriend about the family drama. The only person missing was our golden retriever, Bailey, who had the good sense to hide upstairs whenever voices started rising in the Anderson household. Now that we're all here, Dad began, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he used in business meetings. We need to address the elephant in the room. Victoria's situation. My situation. That's what they'd been calling my life choices for the past 3 years. The decision to drop out of law school. The move to a tiny apartment across town. The refusal to take the entry-level position Dad had arranged at his insurance company. The mysterious computer work I did from home that they couldn't understand or respect. We've been patient, Mom added, her voice soft but firm. We understood you needed to find yourself after law school didn't work out. But honey, this has gone on long enough. Marcus finally looked up from his phone. Victoria, you're 29 years old. When are you going to get serious about your life? I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee Mom had served, noting how it tasted slightly bitter. Everything in this house felt bitter these days. I am serious about my life. Serious, Claire scoffed. You live in a studio apartment and work on a computer all day. That's not serious. That's just existing. Dad walked to the mantelpiece, straightening a family photo that didn't need straightening. It was from Marcus's wedding 3 years ago. In it, I'm standing slightly apart from everyone else, wearing a simple navy dress, while everyone else wore designer clothes. Even in family photos, I was the odd one out. Your mother and I have been talking, Dad continued. We think it's time for some tough love. No more financial support. No more making excuses for you at family gatherings. No more enabling this fantasy you're living. The word fantasy hit harder than I expected. If only they knew that my fantasy involved 16-hour workdays, complex algorithms, and business decisions that affected thousands of people. But I'd learned long ago that explaining my work to them was like speaking a foreign language. We've arranged for you to interview at Patterson and Associates next week, Mom said, pulling out a folder from the coffee table. It's a good firm, stable, respectable. You could start as a paralegal and work your way up. Claire nodded enthusiastically. And there's a lovely apartment complex near downtown. Much more appropriate than that place you're in now. James's sister lives there, and she says it's perfect for young professionals. Young professionals. The term made me want to laugh. If only they knew that young professionals at tech companies were making more in stock options than Dad made in 5 years of selling insurance policies. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I'm good where I am. Marcus set down his phone with an exaggerated sigh. Victoria, this is exactly what we're talking about. You're not good where you are. You're stagnating. You're wasting your potential. What potential? I asked quietly. The question seemed to catch them off guard. Your intelligence, Mom said quickly. Your education. Your family name. You could be someone important. Someone who matters. Someone who matters. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days ago, I'd been in a boardroom with the CEOs of 2 Fortune 500 companies, discussing a merger that would affect global markets. But because I did it wearing jeans instead of a suit, because I worked from a laptop instead of a corner office, because I chose innovation over tradition, my family saw me as irrelevant. We're staging an intervention, Dad announced, his voice taking on that final authoritative tone that meant the discussion was over. Your life is pathetic, Victoria. It's time to face reality. The word pathetic hung in the air like smoke. I felt something shift inside me, a door closing on whatever patience I'd been holding on to. 3 years of subtle digs, disappointed sighs, and embarrassed explanations to their friends. 3 years of being treated like the family failure while I quietly built something they couldn't even comprehend. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a name that made my heart skip. Forbes magazine. Editorial. Perfect timing. I reached for the phone, but Dad's voice stopped me. Don't even think about it. This conversation isn't over. Actually, I said, standing up and answering the call, it might be. I pressed the speaker button before anyone could object. Ms. Anderson? The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight New York accent I recognized immediately. This is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes. Are you ready for our interview session tomorrow? We're incredibly excited about featuring you as our youngest billionaire cover story. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor she'd spent hours polishing that morning. Marcus's phone tumbled from his lap, landing screen first, with a crack that seemed to echo through the room. Claire's perfectly applied lipstick couldn't hide the way her mouth fell open. And Dad just stared at the phone like it was speaking an alien language. Billionaire? Claire whispered, the word merely audible. I smiled, keeping my voice calm and professional. Yes, Jennifer, I'm ready. Should we stick with 2 p.m. tomorrow, or would you prefer to move it earlier? 2 p.m. is perfect. Our photographer will be there at 1:30 for the setup. I have to say, Ms. Anderson, the story of how you built quantum dynamics from your apartment is absolutely fascinating. Our readers are going to love learning about the woman who revolutionized financial algorithms while her family thought she was unemployed. The room was so quiet, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down the seconds until my family's world view completely shattered. Quantum dynamics, Dad repeated slowly, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. That's the company that acquired Goldman Sachs's entire trading algorithm division last month. I finished for him. Yes, that's mine. Marcus found his voice first. But you work on a computer. From your apartment. I run a tech company from my apartment, I corrected. There's a difference. Though I suppose when you're building AI systems that process billions of transactions per second, the location doesn't matter much. Jennifer's voice came through the speaker again. Ms. Anderson, should we mention in the article how you bootstrapped the company with just $50,000? Our fact-checkers want to confirm that quantum dynamics is now valued at $3.2 billion. $3.2 billion. I watched that number hit my family like a physical blow. That's correct, I said, though the valuation changes daily depending on market conditions. Wonderful. Oh, and the photographer specifically wants to capture some shots of your workspace. The idea of a billion-dollar company being run from a modest apartment really drives home the innovation over infrastructure narrative. Mom finally found her voice. Victoria, I don't understand. If your company is worth $3.2 billion, Claire said faintly. She said $3.2 billion. Then why are you living in that tiny apartment? Dad demanded, his confusion overriding his shock. Why drive that old Honda? Why dress like someone who cares more about substance than style? I suggested. Because that's exactly who I am. I turned back to the phone. Jennifer, I'll see you tomorrow. And yes, feel free to photograph the apartment. It's important that people understand success doesn't require corner offices or designer suits. Absolutely. This is going to be a fantastic cover story. The Billionaire Next Door. How Victoria Anderson built a tech empire while her family thought she was unemployed. It practically writes itself. I ended the call and looked around the room at my family's stunned faces. The intervention they'd planned had just become something entirely different. But how? Marcus stammered. How did we not know? I sat back down, suddenly feeling exhausted. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of letting them think I was failing. 3 years of protecting their feelings while they trampled on mine. Because you never asked, I said simply. You saw what you wanted to see. A dropout. A disappointment. Someone who needed to be fixed. Dad sank into his chair, all the authority draining out of his posture. The computer work you said you were doing is artificial intelligence programming. I developed algorithms that can predict market fluctuations with 97% accuracy. Goldman Sachs paid me $800 million for the exclusive licensing rights. $800 million, Claire repeated numbly. That was just one contract, I continued. Quantum Dynamics has developed systems for 12 major financial institutions, 3 government agencies, and we're currently working on a project with the Federal Reserve. Mom stared at the broken coffee cup on the floor, her perfect hostess facade crumbling along with the ceramic. But your apartment is exactly what I need. Quiet, private, with excellent internet connectivity. I don't need a mansion to write code, Mom. I need focus. The Honda, Dad said weakly, gets 40 miles per gallon and has never broken down in 3 years. When you're spending 16 hours a day solving complex mathematical problems, reliable transportation matters more than status symbols. Marcus picked up his cracked phone, staring at the damaged screen like it represented everything he thought he knew about success. We thought you needed help. I did need help, I said, standing up again. I needed my family to believe in me, to ask questions instead of making assumptions, to see that success comes in many forms. I walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where I'd grown up. Every house looked the same, just like every life my family expected people to live. Safe, predictable, ordinary. The Patterson and Associates job, I said without turning around. I actually know the senior partners. They've been trying to hire me as a consultant for 2 years. They want to modernize their entire data analysis system. You could work there? Mom asked hopefully, like this was all just a misunderstanding that could be fixed. I turned back to face them. Mom, I could buy that firm. I could buy the entire building it's in. But I won't. Because that's not what I do. I build things. I create solutions. I don't just exist in someone else's system. The silence stretched out again, heavy with the weight of 3 years of misunderstanding. Victoria, Dad said finally, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. We're sorry. We didn't know. I know you didn't know, I replied. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is that you never tried to know. You decided who I was supposed to be, and when I didn't fit that mold, you assumed I was broken. Claire stood up, still clutching her purse. What happens now? I considered the question. What did happen now? The family meeting they'd called to fix my pathetic life had just revealed that my life was anything but pathetic. The intervention had become an education. The disappointment had become something else entirely. Now, I said, I have a Forbes interview tomorrow, and you all have some thinking to do. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom? That vanilla candle you love so much. I actually invested in the company that makes them. Small world. As I reached for the doorknob, Marcus called out, Victoria, wait. I turned back to see my brother standing by his chair, his face a mixture of confusion and something that might have been respect. The money, he said. What are you going to do with it? I smiled for the first time since entering the house. Same thing I've always done. Build something better. The next afternoon, I sat in my modest apartment, the same studio they'd called pathetic, watching the Forbes photographer adjust his lighting equipment. Jennifer Walsh, the journalist, was reviewing her notes at my kitchen table, which doubled as my desk, conference room, and dining area. This is perfect, the photographer said, snapping test shots. The contrast between the billion-dollar empire and the humble workspace is exactly what we need. Jennifer looked up from her laptop. Victoria, can you walk me through a typical day? Our readers are fascinated by the idea that you're running this massive operation from a 500-square-foot apartment. I gestured to my setup. 3 large monitors, a high-end computer system, and enough computing power to run a small city. Most of my work is conceptual. I design algorithms, test theories, solve problems. I don't need a 1,000-square-foot office to think. And your family had no idea. None. They saw someone who dropped out of law school and worked on computers. They didn't see someone who was revolutionizing financial technology. That must have been difficult. I thought about the previous day's meeting, about 3 years of disappointed looks and concerned conversations. It was, but it also taught me something important about assumptions. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. Speaking of assumptions, I just got word that the pre-orders for this issue are already breaking records. Apparently, the billionaire next door concept is resonating with people. As if on cue, my own phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's name. Excuse me, I said to Jennifer and the photographer. Family call. I stepped into the tiny bathroom, the only private space in my apartment, and answered. Victoria? Mom's voice was tentative, uncertain. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Actually, I'm in the middle of the Forbes interview, but it's okay. Oh my goodness. I forgot. I'm so sorry. I could hear the genuine distress in her voice. Mom, it's fine. What's going on? There was a long pause. Your father and I, we've been talking all night. About yesterday. About everything we said. About everything we didn't understand. I waited, letting her find her words. "We're proud of you," she said finally. "I know that's probably too little, too late, but we're proud of you. And we're sorry we didn't see it sooner." The words hit harder than I expected. 3 years of waiting to hear them. "Thank you," I said softly. Could you come for dinner this weekend?" Real dinner, not an intervention, just family. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the same mirror where I'd practiced presentations, rehearsed investor calls, and gave myself pep talks during the hardest moments of building my company. "I'd like that," I said. "And Victoria, could you maybe tell us about your work?" "Really tell us? We want to understand." I smiled, thinking about the conversation we'd have, about the bridge we might finally build between their world and mine. "I'd love to." When I returned to the main room, Jennifer was setting up for our final questions. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's perfect," I replied, settling back into my desk chair, the same chair where I'd built an empire while my family thought I was wasting my life. "One last question," Jennifer said, her pen poised over her notebook. "What would you say to other young entrepreneurs whose families don't understand their choices?" I thought about the question, about 3 years of doubt and determination, about the phone call that had just changed everything. I'd say that success isn't about meeting other people's expectations. It's about exceeding your own. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is be so undeniably successful that the people who doubted you have no choice but to see who you really are. The photographer snapped one final shot, me at my desk, surrounded by the monitors and equipment that had built my fortune, in the tiny apartment my family had called pathetic. "Perfect," he said, reviewing the image. "This is going to be an incredible cover." As they packed up their equipment, I received a text from Marcus. "Just read about quantum dynamics online. Holy shit, Victoria. You're amazing." Then one from Claire. "Can you teach me about AI? I want to understand what you do." And finally, one from Dad. "Your old room is still here if you ever want to work from home. We'll stay out of your way, but we'd love to have you around." I looked around my apartment, my headquarters, my sanctuary, my launching pad to a billion-dollar empire. Tomorrow, my face would be on the cover of Forbes. Next week, I'd be fielding calls from investors, journalists, and competitors who wanted to understand how I'd done it. But today, I was just Victoria Anderson, the family disappointment who'd built something extraordinary while everyone was busy trying to fix her. My phone rang again. Another reporter, probably, or maybe a potential client who'd heard about the Forbes article. I answered with a smile. "Quantum Dynamics, Victoria speaking. How can I help you?" Because that's what I did. I helped people solve problems they didn't even know they had. I built bridges between the impossible and the inevitable. I turned dreams into algorithms and algorithms into billions. And now, finally, my family knew exactly who I was. The intervention they'd staged to fix my pathetic life had ended up revealing that my life was anything but pathetic. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's proving yourself right in ways they never saw coming. As I settled back into my chair to take the call, I caught my reflection in my computer monitor. The same woman who'd sat in this chair yesterday, building the future while her family planned her intervention. Except now, the future had arrived. And it was worth exactly $3.2 billion.